This session is engaging students through STEAM with household items. It is the same slideshow as last week, so if you've already seen it, I apologize, but hopefully we can reach some new viewers today. And something that was taught to me in both in-person presentations and live PDs is to present with some norms, and they're both for everyone watching and for those of us leading and participating. It's very easy for me to get off task and on tangents, so stay on task is an important one. The second one is to communicate professionally and respectfully. Waiting patiently, it's sometimes difficult to take turns speaking when you can't see when someone's ready to talk or to have a difference of an opinion. So just a friendly reminder of that, and then to hopefully participate actively. It's so much more fun and engaging for everyone to have people interact in the comments and ask questions. And I want to be as helpful as possible. I don't want to just sound like a record machine that's regurgitating information. I want to collaborate with teachers and other people across the district. So hopefully throughout this next 25-ish minutes or so, we'll be able to do all of these successfully. Here's a little bit about me, just a quick background so you can kind of understand where I'm coming from and where I've developed my ideas. I am a STEAM lab teacher for all students K through 5 at Field Elementary. I also serve as our SCC. When I'm not teaching STEAM lab lessons, I'm pulling groups of talent pool students for primary talent pool with where I'm utilizing my gifted and talented endorsement and occasionally my reading license. And this is my 6th year at JCPS, so I'm excited to share some of the things that I've learned and created over the last year. To begin, I want to start with a little background on what my STEAM class looks like in person in the traditional classroom, and then I'm going to go into more depth on how I've been able to adapt it for NDI. Typically, our special area rotation is 60 minutes long, so about an hour a day I have a different grade level in my classroom. I follow a 3-day project rotation, which means I have the same class for 3 days in a row, and then 2 independent days. So Mondays and Fridays are those independent days. So I'm either doing SDC responsibilities, pulling talent pool students, or doing just 1 day art or technology lessons on those days. Those 3-day project rotations are Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, where I can really go in depth with some engineering, science, and math skills to help them build a deeper understanding through some hands-on projects. As you can see in the pictures here, I use a lot of flexible seating to make my room comfortable and inviting, and a lot of group seating, a lot of tables of different sizes and different shapes to really increase student engagement and collaboration in the classroom. Here's a little overview of what those 3 days that I mentioned when I have a 3-day STEAM unit and what it looks like with my students. I try really hard to be consistent with the structure because as the year progressed, students knew what to expect each day and we could get down to business a lot quicker. On the first day, I always include a read aloud. Sometimes it's fictional, sometimes it's nonfiction, but I love to incorporate literacy in my STEAM lab. I think it's great for engagement, but it's also a skill for students to see how different content areas can be connected. We go over an anchor chart that we work through together that usually introduces key vocabulary and the topics that we're going to be focused on. And then we do a little Foursquare activity sheet to reflect on the information learned that day. On the second day, they come in, and it's a lot less of that direct instruction, and this is a little bit more guided. We have QR codes around the room that students go research more about our topic, and they work in partners with iPads. So this is a perfect time where I get to go around to pairs of students individually and kind of check in on their understanding. I can identify if they have some misconceptions about the topics, if they have questions, if they're confused, what they're learning, what they're finding interesting. And so that's that fact reporting that you see on there where they can kind of just tell me about it. Some students like to take notes, and I allow them to do that as well. And then on the third day, it's usually the most fun, where they take all the information that they've gathered over the last 2 days, and they get to design and create a blueprint of their project. They get to build it, and then we come together and reflect on it. And as much as I would like to take credit for all the resources that I use, as you can see on the bottom, there's a link to the curriculum that I use that I found online from one of my favorite STEM and gifted teachers, Brooke Brown. She has a blog called Teach Outside the Box, and it very coincidentally works out that she focuses on STEM, and she is a certified gifted and talented instructor. So our vision and teaching style aligns greatly, and I've been able to adapt it into this 3-day model that I can use with my students.
That's great. You spoke about how they shared iPads, and I know you have like enough devices for all your students. Is that just so they can collaborate when they work?
Well, I do not have enough iPads for every student to have one independently. I have about 18 in my room, and so I do have to pair them up. But yes, the collaboration is key, and we do a lot of variety of me choosing partners, them choosing partners, random generated partners, all kinds of things to get them interacting with each other. And it is really helpful to hear them bounce conversation and ideas off of each other, because sometimes they don't quite grasp the concept that they're reading about or listening about in a video. And so to have someone else there to throw in an opinion is really helpful.
That's great. And also, I noticed you talked about kind of finding your own STEM curriculum, and that is because Kentucky does not have STEM or STEAM standards, correct?
Correct. So they do have the next generation science standards, which I lean on a little bit. I try to look at the STEM curriculum that I find online and see which activities align best with which grade levels. But to be honest with you, I really enjoy the freedom of being able to pick and choose what I think would fit my students' interests and their ability levels, and what they'll enjoy.
Yeah, that's great.
So here I'm going to show a few pictures of some of the things that I talked about. This one I did, I think, around early January after returning from break. And it was one that I was really intimidated by. This is a Forces of Flight unit that I did with my kindergarten and first graders. And it focused on paper airplanes. But when it came time to learn the science and engineering behind it, there was some serious vocabulary that I was unsure of if the students were really going to grasp or understand. And I was just blown away about their ability. Now, as you can see, they probably could not regurgitate word for word those definitions on our anchor chart. But what I was so proud of is they were able to use that model at the bottom that has all the arrows with the airplane. And I could say a vocabulary word, and they could tell me with and without the chart what direction that force was helping. So lift, they could point up. Thrust, they would say forward and point forward. Gravity, they would point down. And drag, they would point backwards. And they were really proud of themselves for being able to identify that and connect it to those big vocabulary words. When you look at the other picture, there's the Foursquare. That's the activity sheet we do on the first day, where it gives some examples and information. With my older students, we typically write a little bit more, but I was very pleased that my kindergarten and first graders were able to write down those vocabulary words that we did together. And my favorite part is when I get to see how they can apply what they learned. That last box on the bottom right asked other things that use forces of flight. And I love that this kindergartner drew me a helicopter. We did not talk about helicopters. We talked about airplanes. And so it was really cool to see how he was able to transfer that knowledge about forces of flight and think of a helicopter all on his own.
Hey, Natalie, we have a question if you want to answer it.
Yeah, I'd love to answer a question.
Okay, so the question has been posed. If you had all the money in the world, what would you purchase for your lab?
Oh, my goodness. Wow. Probably more technology and consumable materials. One of the biggest reasons that I have most of my students work in groups is to help save costs on materials for things that they create and build. And so probably an unlimited supply of things like pipe cleaners and cotton balls and construction paper and all the things that are decently affordable in small amounts, but when you're constantly using them daily, you can go through pretty quickly.
And you just got a really cool thing that on your Donors Choose, didn't you?
I did. Yesterday with a wonderful Sonic match, I was able to get 30 Chromebooks funded to have in our lab this fall. So I'm very excited.
That's
Currently
great.
At my school, we don't have enough for every class or every grade level just yet. We were working towards that. And so I kind of have been sharing as well with all the special area teachers and the classroom teachers. So I'm very excited to have a set of Chromebooks that will stay in the lab that I can use on a daily basis with my students to really enhance their 21st century technology skills. Very excited about that.
That is great. I'm excited about that as well. I'm happy for you.
Yes, I think we're going to have to come in and we're going to have to do some co-teaching, Stephen.
Yes, I'm ready. I knew that was coming.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. My ideas I can't do alone, so I figured you'd know that I'd be calling on you. But
yeah, well, the great thing is, and I'm sure you'll be a pro with the Chromebooks after a year, but that's been one of the, this, and having to do NTI, it's unfortunate, but so many teachers who never had the time to learn Google Classroom or get proficient with Google tools, they're getting there during this time. And so I am excited about that, to see them take those skills back when we return to the physical classroom.
Yes, and like you said, NTI is not ideal, but there is a very real chance that we may encounter another round of NTI at some point during the next school year. And the more we can do to prepare our students and our families to be tech savvy, I think an easier the experience will be going forward, whether we have a long bout like this or it's snow days or anything in between. It's just going to be a really good skill for students to have. All right, so back to our presentation. This is from that second day. I've got a little QR corner that I've made in my classroom that you can see with the grade levels. 4th and 5th, we typically do the same project, 2nd and 3rd, in kindergarten and 1st. And the students have learned how to use QR codes successfully with our iPads to go up and scan the codes. And this is just another way to provide a little freedom while still helping them build background knowledge, because a lot of the topics that we cover in STEAM are not always taught in a traditional homeroom setting. So we've got to build a lot of background knowledge before they can adequately and correctly build projects, because I want them to understand what they're doing, not just doing something that they're told. And so we have those QR codes posted around the classroom in addition to that corner so that they can spread out and scan and work together. And you can see in that top picture 2 of our boys watching a video. Now, sometimes these codes take them to videos. That's usually what most of them are, but sometimes they're brief articles. Sometimes they're interactive pages. They're just all kinds of different things that help them deepen their understanding of whatever our core topic is for that week in that unit, so that they are better prepared when they get to build and create. The 3rd day is our favorite day of the 3-day project. Students get to design a blueprint of what they're going to create, whatever their challenge was for that week. There's a way for them to demonstrate some more of that knowledge that they acquired from those QR codes. And then they get to build, test, and reflect on what they're doing. So in this picture, this is from my 3rd graders. They did a unit on slingshots. And so you can see in the blueprint, the student created a nice little model of what his slingshot's going to look like. He listed some examples of potential and kinetic energy. He talked about how he drew a model of how they could be useful. You can see in the bottom left that he tested 3 times the distance his slingshot could go. And then he reflected on what improvements he could make on it. So he worked with his partner, and you can see that they're using yardsticks to measure how far he was able to sling his little cotton ball. And so after we have time to do this and build and reflect on the papers, we get together as a class and we share out what went well and what was challenging and what they would do differently next time. And it's a great time for me to see what they learned and what they liked. And it also allows me to know if this was a good project for them, if it was too difficult, if I need to scale back, or if I need to make it more challenging in the future. So I always love that time where we can get together and really share what they did and what they know. Tiffany, how are we doing in the chat? Any questions or comments?
So most people are just saying how much they kind of like your 3-day plan, and they like the tools that you're using. They love the idea of investigation of research through videos, articles, interactives before they plan and design. It helps them realize how important background knowledge is.
Awesome. Great.
I was just thinking about the pacing. I too enjoy the 3-day plan, because I was thinking, if you just tried to if put this in 2 day, then you would have kids not ready to do the experiment or not finish the experiment, and then it causes management material issues. So I think the 3 day plan has them prepared so that when the materials are out and they're doing the experiments, they're able to get it done in that one class period.
Yes, and it's very evident that it's needed because there are weeks, when there's holidays or assemblies or different things that I've had to cram projects into 2 days because I won't see that class for another 3 weeks that I don't want to, delay it. It's a lot harder. And like you said, the management gets tougher. The kids get flustered. The projects don't get done as efficiently. And it definitely makes a difference when they don't get that full time. So I'm very fortunate that our school has designed the special area block in a way that I can see the same classes for 3 days in a row, because it really adds to that experience and makes it more meaningful for them.
That's great. I also noticed some comments in the chat about getting materials. Do you have any pointers for these STEM teachers watching? I always considered the first couple STEM teachers I knew, they were like scavengers. They're like always on the lookout for materials that can be used with their students. You got any tips for those people that are looking for good ways to get lots of materials?
Well, first and foremost, don't be afraid to ask for things, whether you're asking from your PTA or your bookkeeper or your family and friends or the parents at your school. We do a lot of mass communication on social media and other places. And so when I know I'm going to need certain things coming up, especially if they're recyclable and reusable materials, I'll just say, I need cardboard boxes by next Friday. If you have any, please send them in with your student. And most of the time I get more than I can keep up with, or I need egg cartons, or I need this or that. And the more you do that, people start realizing the kind of things that you need, and they'll start reaching out before you even ask for it. Someone will say, I've got this whole box of pipe cleaners I found in my attic. Would you want them? Sure enough, yes. So making those connections and not being afraid to ask for that. People have a lot of stuff around their house that you don't even know that they have, that they're really looking to give to the good home and a good cause. And when you give people a little bit of notice, you'd be surprised at how much you can collect for free. And then, of course, if you can't obtain things freely, yard sales are a great place to find random knickknack things. And even our JCPS bid lists, when you order stuff, you can save a lot of money by buying a lot of craft material in bulk if you can give yourself the time to plan ahead and think for the year what might be materials that you need. You can order them ahead of time, which is really helpful as well.
Great information. Thank you.
Yeah. So now I want to kind of flip to how I've adapted what normally goes on in my STEAM lab for NTI. So for my intermediate students, I stick to this model that we've been following of using the challenges and the QR codes and the reflection sheet and different things like that, but with a few modifications. The challenges themselves remain the same. I would have used most of these that we've been doing during NTI during the remainder of the school year. A big change is that the materials become optional. In the STEAM lab, I usually present the students with materials to have. I don't tell them how to use it or how to make it work, but I provide all the materials. Being during NTI, I don't have the ability to give students materials, so I make them optional. Here's some recommended materials if you have them at your home. If not, get creative and see what you can replace or change. Because I want it to be very flexible and fluid. During this time of NTI, one of the reasons we're not out at school is because we're not interacting with the public. So I don't want parents feeling obligated to have to run out to stores and buy things to be able to complete these activities. So it's been very clear and well explained to them that the ideas and materials lifted on these projects are completely optional. Another thing that I changed is I don't do a read aloud with the lesson for a few reasons. The first and foremost is I don't want this to be a full-on 3-day project for our students. NTI is a very trying time for our families and the students, and I want them to get the most out of it without all the fluff or things that might make it last longer. In addition to that, they've got a lot of other things outside of my STEAM lessons that they are trying to keep up with. And so having them log on and watch a video of me reading a book or needing to do a live lesson would probably cause most of my families and students more stress than help. So I've eliminated that part. And then one other thing that I eliminated was the anchor chart. It's very difficult to see the anchor charts on a screen, and so it hasn't been as useful or helpful to include those, so I have not done that. But I've been very fortunate that the resources that I use all have a Google Slides version, which I'm getting ready to share with you how I've been able to adapt that. So one of the first ones I started with was the egg drop challenge. If you look back on my Twitter, you'll see that I shared some examples from this where the whole family was getting engaged. All my projects start with a page like this. It has a title of the challenge. It gives a scenario and then a specific sentence about the challenge. So in this case, it says, construct a protective container that will keep your egg from breaking when it is dropped. Below is a box of the materials, and this is where I remind my families the materials that are listed in this box are just a suggestion. You can use whatever you want. I even had families reach out to me and say, we don't eat eggs. What should we do? We don't have eggs. So I said, get creative. Find something that you value, not too much, but you value enough that you want to protect. And so one of my students took one of his favorite action figures, and that was his egg that he was trying to protect, that he didn't want to get damaged when he dropped it. Then the next slide you'll see is kind of what I use to replace the anchor charts. I have access to these all year long anyways, so I use a lot of this words to know page when I'm creating my anchor charts. So this kind of takes the place of that, where it gives them some vocabulary to help them understand. And then you can see here this little Foursquare of videos that they can watch to help build that background knowledge. Now, if you were able to edit this slide, you would be able to pull the video away and actually see that there's a QR code underneath. So this is very familiar to the students, especially the 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders who are a lot more independent. It was not as tough of a learning curve to switch to doing this virtually because a lot of it was very familiar to them. And then the last one is, well, not the last one, but the next one is the Foursquare that we complete as a class. I just add some text boxes and some numbered points to kind of help them get an idea of what I'm looking for. I didn't want to be too specific. I want to allow them to interpret the prompts however they see fit. And then their recording sheet. So this was really fun for me because I was able to teach them how to insert pictures or insert text to be able to show, or use Google Drawings to do different things on these slides. And then it would end with the reflection questions that I talked to them about. I was very clear that they did not have to respond to all of these by typing or writing or anything like that. But I have some families that have really enjoyed this part, and so they would submit written responses or video responses of their reflection. And so I was really happy to see how well my students were able to adapt to this online model, because it so well resembles what we do in the regular classroom.
I think that's great. And I've seen so many teachers do that. Like, they know what their kids should already know. And how do they take it the next step using technology or using what's at home? For example, you wouldn't ask your kids to draw a blueprint if they hadn't already done it with you before in class.
Right, because that's not a typical word that most students would be familiar with unless at some point they were taught what a blueprint is and why it's necessary. So great point, Stephen. So I want to show off some student work that I've seen and how much of a variety and different ways that they are sharing their information. And all of them are wonderful and great examples of demonstrating their learning. So this is actually from a different challenge. This is not from the egg drop. This was from a build a nest challenge for your birds or peeps. And so you can see that this student inserted some pictures of the nest that he created. He typed in the text box of what he used for his materials, and then he typed in the text box for how tall it was and how many things fit inside of it. So his was very tech savvy with his typing and his insertion of pictures. This student, on the other hand, preferred how we do it in class. He printed out the paper and he drew it by hand. He wrote on it by hand. And one thing that I really wanted to point out is how resourceful he was with his materials. One of the questions is, how many cubes high is your nest? When I would do this in the classroom, we would use linking cubes as a unit of measurement to see how tall it is. He didn't have linking cubes at home, so you can see that he crossed out linking cubes and wrote Legos. So he was able to measure how high his nest was by 31 Legos. So I thought that was a really creative way for him to alter the activity to meet his needs.
Natalie, we have a question about vocabulary.
Yeah.
In the classroom, are they held accountable in any way for the vocabulary, or do you just post like them somewhere?
Yeah, I don't hold them accountable for that. There's no like grade or assessment that they understand it. I might do some oral questioning throughout and intentionally using it and encouraging them to use it, especially with the intermediate kids. When they do writing or reflection, I'll tell them, try to use some of the vocabulary words in your answers that we learned this week, but there's not really a specific accountability measure for them. It's just to help them, mostly to build more background knowledge and to understand, because more than likely those words that we learn on the first day are probably going to be heard in the videos and things that they're watching, and I want them to be prepared to understand that.
Thank you.
Awesome. Great question. And then this one was super fun. This student used Google Drawings to help design his model of his bird nest. That was super creative. This was a 5th grader. And then, of course, he used the text boxes to answer the other questions on the slides. So it was very fun to see the variety of how different students use the material and the technology or hand and paper or pencil and paper work to do all the same project, all with wonderful answers and great ways of demonstrating their knowledge. All right, so we're going to flip a little bit over to our primary students. That's our kindergarten through 2nd grade. Although in the regular STEAM lab, they do participate by using the full-on projects, I thought that was a little bit too much for them. So I decided to use some choice boards. And Stephen, I just realized we were really low on time. So
That's okay. I'm sorry. I talked to you a little too much. You're doing fine. You can have a couple more minutes.
Okay. I'll still try to be quick, but I switched for them just simply because technology takes them a lot longer to do and their parents are a lot more hands-on. Instead of doing those full projects, we use STEM menus. And so you can see right there the link at the bottom. These are free STEM menus that I found online that you are welcome to use with your students. They have been a huge hit. And if you look at my Twitter, majority of the student work that I share, especially from the primary students, are from these STEM menus. So you can access those there. And for them, they also have a structure that I follow the same every week for the students and the families to get really familiar. It's just a template of Google Slides where it tells them, look at choice board number 1. This is week 1. Choose 2 activities to complete. And then they insert information, pictures, or words about what they did on these 2 slides. So here are some examples of those. This one, clearly she had help with the writing on this one, but one of the challenges was to create an amusement park ride, and so she built her own carousel, and her family helped her explain what she did and how she did it. On this one, here's another one. It's a little less typing, but same challenge of an amusement park. And then sometimes they choose to forego the Google slide deck anyways, which is totally fine, and they'll just attach pictures or videos to the Google Classroom assignment, or they'll just email or Class Dojo me with pictures and descriptions, and all of it works perfectly fine because I don't want to add to the stress for our families. I don't want them to spend forever trying to navigate a Google slide deck that they can't figure out how to insert something. And so I'm very flexible on how we get that feedback, which kind of leads me into my last slide that I really want to focus on. Is these are some tips and tricks that I feel are most helpful for implementing these activities, but really they can be applied to anything. They don't have to be STEAM or STEM related. This could be for your math classroom, your reading classroom, and I think they're just really helpful for NTI. So the first one is flexible materials. As I mentioned, since they're at home and we're not providing them anything, we need to be very flexible on what they're allowed to use and how they can complete our activities. We need to be consistent with the format. That's like using the same type of Google slide templates that I use from week to week, and the menus and the structure of the challenges, so that it becomes familiar for them and they're not spending more time navigating and learning the product and spending more time on the content. extended and loose deadlines. I do post deadlines and due dates on Google Classroom. It helps them find the assignments easier, but I'm very flexible on when they turn them in and how they turn them in. And alternative ways to submit, like I mentioned, if the Google Classroom is too difficult, they email me or the Class Dojo me or Class Tag or whatever communication tool that their classroom is using. I receive stuff that way, and they can modify the assignment. I know for the primary students, I encourage them to choose 2 activities. Sometimes they just choose 1 because that's all they have time for that week, and that's totally fine. And I love to stay in regular and frequent communication with them. During this NTI time, we're focusing much more on feedback and not grading things. So we're telling them, great job on this. Have you thought about that? What do you think about this? And just staying in communication to show that I am proud and that I care about what they're doing. And then lastly, this is what I've gotten the most feedback on. Those 2 hyperlinks will take you to instructional videos that I made on Screencastify, going through the Google slide decks for both the intermediate and the primary students so they can see exactly how to access them, how to insert things on them, how to type on them, how to submit them. And I've gotten a lot of great feedback from our parents that it was really helpful for them to understand how to navigate the materials that were given to them and what was expected of them. One last quick thing that I want to mention is that prior to NTI, I did do some Facebook Live lessons using household materials, and I wanted to share the link with that. The first link is my STEAM with Ms. Schmidt Facebook page where I have all those live videos that if you want to share with your students or families or friends, anyone, they're great at-home lessons for students of all ages. And like I've mentioned before, none of these are completely my own ideas, so there's some links to online experiments that inspired me and art lessons that inspired me for those as well. And lastly, I just wanted to share my social media. If anybody wanted to interact, I would love to answer any quick questions or comments so I can support people during this time. But I also want to be mindful of Brandy and her next session. So Tiffany, anything real quick that I can respond to or wrap up?
One question was just, do you see the vocabulary words come up in their writing or when they're talking? And that was about it. So great job.
I do sometimes, and that's something that I had to foster and encourage over time. In the beginning, I was having to probe them more and try to get them to use it. And over time, it became more natural for them to include that in their writing and in their conversations.
Well, thank you very much, Natalie. Thank you, Tiffany, for helping out, keeping an eye on the chat. It was good seeing you. Great presentation. And we hope teachers can take that away and get their kids doing some cool STEM things at home using the materials they have at home, or just in good STEM ideas for when they return to the classroom as well. Thank you.
Definitely. Great. Thank you so much for having us.